Welcome to the budget reduction proposal that I made to the Owen School Board on November 19th. I've added a few more slides in here just to illustrate a little bit more about school budgeting. So before we get started, I want to just do a quick overview on school budgets. So here's your 90-second school budget overview. So our general fund, which is built by local property taxes and school supplemental aid from the state of Iowa, makes up about $17 million of our actual budgeting. And that silo is used for salaries and supplies and those kind of things. We have another fund called the SAVE and the PEPL fund are a different revenue generating stream. They can only be used on brick and mortar or technology. So if we remodel a building or buy laptops, it can only come out of that fund. And we receive just over $1 million annually for that fund. We do get federal monies and federal grants, and those equate to half to $750,000, depending on the year. And again, those can only be spent on specific programs within the title categories. And our last fund is a local tax levy. That's our management fund, which gets used for early retirement packages and to pay our liability insurance through EMC. So of all those resources, management makes up about 3% of our total budget. The SAVE or PEPL is about 6%, and title is about 4%. And again, all of those are categorical, meaning the funding streams are isolated and how the money gets in there, and then they're also categorical. So you can only spend that monies on certain things. The rest of our budget is a general fund, making up a large percentage of what we spend money on. So in the general fund, about 5% of that 17 million goes to professional services, 7% goes to supplies to keep the school operating, 6% goes to our energy costs, electricity, about 3% goes to transportation, and then 79% of our general fund budget goes to staff. So our current situation is that we receive our revenue in the general fund based on a student number set by the state. So it's a dollar amount per pupil. And based on our student enrollment, that's how much we are told that we can spend each year. And over the past several years, you can see that we've spent more than the revenue that we've brought in. We had a reserve, and so which is okay in some years when you have a declining enrollment, but when you do it 5 years in a row, you create a situation where we need to reduce our spending to match our revenue. So our current reality, basically this year, the fiscal year that we're currently operating under, we will estimate that we have $17.1 million in expenditures this fiscal year running through June 30th. And we will have the revenue of about $16.5 million, which is a difference of about $600,000. So we have made cuts. We didn't replace some positions last year. We also closed a building. Again, we estimate that saved between $200,000 and $300,000. And so those numbers are reflected in this estimate. So without those costs being saved, this number would be closer to $1 million. The blue line on top illustrates our unspent authorized balance. So this is the number that we are actually able to spend, and this is a percentage. So we're about 22% of our balance remaining in our unspent authority. That's authority to spend. But our solvency, which is our cash on hand, you can see has diminished greatly over the past several years. So this year we're estimating that we will not quite, but almost zero that number out. And without making the necessary changes, we will be in the negative and basically get in a situation where we have to borrow money to make payroll without making our necessary budget reductions. So as presented to the school board, looking at that solvency rate, how much cash we need to have on hand to operate effectively, we needed to cut basically to end up at negative 2% solvency. Again, we're still borrowing money to pay payroll. We're looking at $400,000 in cuts to balance the budget to have zero and also end up with 0% solvency. We're looking at $600,000, and then building in a slight cushion, adding to our solvency is at 2%. We need to make $800,000 in cuts. We have had some changes over the last few years. The low supplemental state aid number from the state of Iowa, from the legislature, is a major contributor here. It has not kept pace over the past several years with inflation, with increased utility costs, those kind of things, and that's really one of the big drivers here. Although we are up in enrollment this year, the trend over the last 5-6 years has been declining, and so that's a driving factor here. And just remember too, our revenue is a year behind. So although we were up in enrollment this year, those numbers aren't technically generated till next year. Although we are asking the SBRC board for on-time funding for that increase in student enrollment to help our budget situation. We have increased our staff FTE, both in terms of certified and classified staff over the last 3 or 4 years, and so we're kind of going opposite directions. So we have fewer students, but more staff serving those students, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's just it has an impact on your budget, and that's what's driving the increasing expenditures. And then also we have an increase in special ed expenditures. The state is not adjusting the weighting for special ed, and therefore it's also not keeping pace with the cost of educating special ed students, especially level 2-3 students, either in behavior centers or internally in our level 2-3 classrooms. So our budget goals for the school district are, number one, we want to have clear financial objectives for the school district. We want to be transparent in the process for all stakeholders, so taxpayers, students, staff, community members. It's important that we seek feedback and receive ideas from all those stakeholders when we're looking at making reductions, so that we can have the best ideas possibly presented to us and move forward in the smartest way possible. And then lastly, when it comes to a budget reduction, we want to build trust with all stakeholders by doing what we say we're going to do. So our timeline for this process, the school board decided on a budget goal at our November meeting. At the regular December meeting, they will approve a reduction scoring matrix to help establish prioritizing potential reductions. And then in January, they're going to receive and review an itemized line item list with the scores for those budget reductions, and then potentially have community meetings for anybody interested in learning more about what's on that list, where we can dive into what makes the details of some of the list items work. In February, there will be a recommendation for reduction, and the board at that time could have potential approval, or they could choose to wait and review for a month, and then in March make their final approval for reductions, along with our annual budget meeting where we look to approve our budget for fiscal year 2020. So again, November, just looking at setting those goals, and the school board did that. They did vote to move the goal to the 800,000 mark, which gives us a 2% solvency, which is the most conservative mark that we were looking at. It could go more, but we don't believe that it would be healthy for us to make cuts beyond that $800,000 mark. So in December, the administration is going to start looking at those line item potential ideas, and there will be a scoring matrix. We'll receive staff and board input on the ranking of those items, and then we will begin estimating potential cost reduction items. So here's what that might look like. So based on minimizing impact on student safety, would have a high score, whereas maintaining maintenance of facilities may have a lower score, or negative impact on level of service for mandated programs. So basically just identifying areas where we need to have things to meet minimum requirements for state and federal mandates versus just having a clean building, and where those items might fall. So in January, we will again share that line item idea list with the board, staff, and the public, and it will be scored to by the administrators to show against that score rubric, basically to identify a score so that we can add some level of objective analysis to this process. Again, here's what a hypothetical scoring guide might look like, where we have the administrator sit down and score it, and then those against all the different criteria, and then those scores all get tallied up to create a total score for each individual item, and then those individual items will be ranked for the highest level of concern to the lowest level of concern. In February, again, and potentially late January, we'll have community meetings to review them. Again, there'll be lots of questions. Something on the list may not make sense of how we came to the number that we are showing, and we want to talk about that a little bit, or somebody may want to learn more about that. And so we'll have those meetings so that we can, again, be transparent and share how we arose at those numbers. And then there may be time for a board session to learn more about those reductions as well. And then I'll be prepared to make a final recommendation on those reductions. And then in March, there will be a public hearing on our fiscal year 2020 budget. And at the time, the board really should have its final reduction package ready to approve if they haven't already done so. And then following that approval, it's up to the administrative team to complete and carry out the reductions, whatever they may be. So a lot of work in front of us, but it's doable. And we're going to do it smart, and we're going to do it with transparency and input from all. Thanks for listening.